Kodiak Island, a wildlife photographer's paradise, an environment teeming with small birds, migrating waterfowl, some of the coolest small deer you'll ever see, fox, shorebirds, amazing bays and beaches, multitude of islands, whales, snow-capped mountains, pristine rivers and streams, and of course the two subjects I've been most looking forward to, the Kodiak brown bear along with the tufted and horned puffins. This is an archipelago remote enough for thousands of years to cause the region's brown bear and the red fox to become their own subspecies, much larger than their mainland cousins. And this is the destination we've been planning to return to for over a year. And that plan was to spend 3 weeks on Kodiak Island in the middle of summer to coincide with the puffins roosting and the bears coming out of the hills with their cubs to feast on the sockeye salmon returning to the rivers. And how did that plan work out? Well, let's talk about it. Last year, my trip to Kodiak, the 1st of August, was only 4 days, including travel to and from the island. During that time, we saw a little bit of everything. Puffins flying by the cliffs, fox working the creek bed, shorebirds, starfish on the bays, and Kodiak bears fishing along the river. Right then and there, I knew I had to come back and spend a few weeks. So all fall and winter, I researched the island, the behavior, the breeding times for everything that was on the island. I talked to everyone I knew that either visited or photographed on the island of the different animals that I was interested in watching and photographing on Kodiak Island. I knew the main subject I wanted to find was the two puffin species located here in Alaska, the horned and the tufted puffins. I see a lot of them when I'm traveling on the ocean fishing or whale watching, but thought of being able to spend long periods of time with these birds near their nests and on the cliffs really occupied my mind daily. And to be able to see some more Kodiak bears would just be icing on the cake. I mean, who wouldn't want to see more Kodiak bears? They're such an incredible and amazing creature. Plus, there's a lot of seabirds that I don't easily find on the mainland that are here on this island. And then there are the beaches with tons of starfish we discovered last year. Needless to say, my excitement for this trip as it got closer and closer was like a kid waiting for Christmas morning to arrive. With all the research and planning, the best time to see the puffins and bears looked to be early July. The sockeye would be in the rivers, bringing the bears down from the mountains, and the puffins usually start pairing up in late June and start nesting in July. I was lucky enough that my Uncle Don could come join me on this year's adventure again, and we decided to head to Kodiak for the first 3 weeks of July by the way of the Alaska Marine Highway on the ferry so we could have my truck with us and all the gear I needed to explore the Kodiak Island. So sit back and enjoy as I fill you in on our experiences of those 3 weeks, and in the coming weeks I'll have more in-depth Kodiak adventures to share with you. And this will be another one of those tales of best laid planned scenarios and another tale of perseverance. Don was able to make it to Alaska from Oklahoma a week prior to our departure for Kodiak, and he was very happy to be in Alaska under the 60-degree temperatures here in Alaska, as Oklahoma was in its normal July 100-plus degree temperatures. And I was exploring the Anchorage Bowl, breaking in our gear and getting the run and gun gear lined out. We started looking at the upcoming weather for our first few days that was coming up in Kodiak, and it wasn't looking pretty. It looked like the ride down to Homer to catch the ferry, the 5-hour run, was going to be mostly rain, and the ferry over was going to be mostly cloudy, and the first 3 days of our trip looked like it would be a very amount of rain and clouds. But we really weren't too concerned, as first we'd be in Kodiak, and second, the weather would for sure clear up for the next 3 weeks on the island, wouldn't it? Right? And sure enough, the ride down to Homer was all rain, and the ferry experience was great, but we didn't see much as the ferry didn't leave Homer until around 11 p.m. due to delays. It was like 2 hours late behind schedule. So we ended up racking out around midnight on the ferry in our bunks, and we got up for breakfast on the ferry. It was too cloudy to see much of the ocean at all. We could barely see outside the boat. And by the way, the breakfast on the ferry is fantastic if you ever get a chance to ride the ferry. The ferry ride we had 2 stops on the way to drop passengers off and pick them back up. And the first was the village of Port Lions, and the second was Ozinki, I hope I'm saying that right, which has a gorgeous Russian church, and that's really cool. So I've been trying to get a shot at all the Russian churches around the Kenai Peninsula and the different islands, and I'm hoping one day to make a photo series or a book of these photos. And I really hope this wind's not too much. It's really blowing in my face. I'm hoping this mic and that mic's really going to cut that wind noise down, but we shall see. But anyway, once we got near the villages, we were closer to the islands where we could start to see them. We started to see puffins, and it was just incredible. I love puffins, by the way, if you haven't noticed so far. From here, we entered Kodiak Harbor around 11 a.m., and we eventually got our truck off the ferry, and we headed to our accommodations for the 3 weeks, and we started to unload our gear and get ready for the exploration we're about to have. So after we got unloaded, we headed out and hit some of the hot spots we knew on the north end of the island along the cliffs and hoped of seeing some seabirds or puffins flying back and forth. But no luck. And a little bit later, we met up our friends and bear guide John and Lydia, who live in Kodiak. And we checked a few more spots along the river to see if any salmon or bears are showing up. And again, no luck. After that, we all just went out for a nice dinner and then called it a night. The next day, we met up again with John and Lydia and started to explore the island south of Kodiak. It was another rainy day with small breaks in the rain, but still dark gray skies. We didn't find any bears along the way or puffins, but we did have our very first cool find. Shorebirds, semi-palmated plovers, yellowlegs, dowitchers, and sandpipers along the flats feeding into the ocean. And I got a couple of my best plover shots to date. So very cool. We spent most of the day photographing these shorebirds, and closer to evening, John and Lydia had to head off. And Don and I continued to explore a little more and came around a corner on one of the gravel roads and came across this scene. An eagle on an amazing perch amongst the lupine. And over the next few days was the same story. We'd start our day, check the weather, see if the day was going to be 50 to 100% chance of rain, grab some breakfast, meet up with John and Lydia sometime throughout the day, and head south most days looking for bears or puffins. The road out of Kodiak heading south along the shore ends up in a T in a highway. And if you take the left, you head out and hit a Chiniak Highway. If you go to the right, you're down Pagashek Highway. Both are completely different landscapes. Down the Chiniak Highway, it's a coastal reef-filled bays, and along Pagashek Highway, it's more farmland, high cliffs, and long sweeping beaches. One is rugged bays, and the other is more vast surf-style beaches. One of the beaches is even called Surfers Beach, which has huge waves and rollers. It's impressive to say the least. And the result? No bears and no puffins again. In a week and a half, we had 2 days maybe with half day of partially sunny skies, and the rest of the time it was full clouds and rain. Kind of became a joke with Don and myself was we would head out each day looking, and then we'd round a curve and get a good view of the bay and the area and sedge grass or a cliff face where we think puffins would be. And I'd probably say no bears, and Don would say no puffins. Okay, it was a little bit funny to us because we were starting to lose our mind due to all the rain. So you may ask, what was going on? Why, after all the planning you did, were you striking out even with the local bear guide helping us search? Well, two major things. And those two things are the most basic for any bird or animal: food and environment. First, the environment. Kodiak and most south central Alaska has had a very cold winter and a late snow breakup and melt, and a very cold spring and summer. Everything has been about 2 months late as far as animals go and the birds, with temperatures from 45 to 55 degrees most days when it's normally 60 to 80 degrees. And so that just has made everything about 2 months late. The migrating birds that normally present here or on Kodiak Island were either missing or, as I said, 2 months late. And so either they, due to the cold and the snow and the ice still, a lot of them either stopped short of coming this way or bypassed the area altogether to find an area that was more open for them. This has also caused the puffins to be out at sea and not move in numbers to roosting spots. And if you know anything about puffins, puffins spend their entire life on the water, and they only come to shore, or on cliffs this is, to roost during mating season. And the second issue was food. Bears tend to feed on roots and grass before the salmon come in the rivers, and the first fish that normally hit the river are the sockeye salmon. And they just didn't come in this year. On the peninsula and mine right next to the woods, tons of salmon. On Kodiak Island, almost no sockeye salmon. The numbers were even so low that the sockeye sport fish in most rivers were shut down. This meant that the bears were staying high up in the mountains and only ventured down at night to check the streams and go back up into the hills to feed up there. And the sedges that were normally mature in this time of year, the tributaries, which is another food source the bears like, wasn't there, which that meant the bears weren't coming down for that either. So all hopes for seeing the bears on the road system part of the island where we were at were pretty much gone, and the same for finding puffins roosting along the island cliffs. They just weren't there. The weather issues were also causing catching a ride out to Katmai National Park. Usually we could catch a last-minute booking out to the park, but there was so many cancellations due to the weather that the normal open spots ended up being rebookings for those that had already got bumped. And that couple spots that we thought we'd had going into this ended up being us getting bumped for those people that had been bumped before that were doing makeup trips. So the bears ended up being a miss for us on this whole trip. Now, hopefully I'll be able to get back out in September to fly out to Katmai with John. Good for me, bad for Don, but I have to go see my bears. But luckily we saw a window about the 10th day of this trip for a good sunny day and no winds. And even luckier, John had a friend who'd get us out in the Chiniak and Marmot Bays to find some puffins. And boy, did we find puffins. It was a perfect day in the water, and the puffins we did find in abundance. And as a bonus, we found humpback and fin whales. Fin whales are huge. Their only whale that's larger is the blue whale. They're monstrous. And that will also be an adventure you'll get to experience with me very soon in a video to come. I don't want to get too far into that trip because it was fantastic. Working through all this video and images I've captured over the last 3 weeks is just taking a ton of time. But needless to say, this is one of the best days in the water I've had here in Alaska. It was just amazing. So stay tuned for that video. Now, even though we didn't find what we expected on the island due to the weather and the salmon runs and that didn't make it in and that didn't have any bears or puffins, well, at least on the island, we did have a fantastic time and great wildlife photography excursion. How, you may ask? Well, Kodiak has an abundance of small birds, sparrows, swallows, finches, and the like. And we had a field day shooting these fun little guys as they were everywhere. And to boot, the lupine was blooming, and we were able to capture a lot of these birds on or around these gorgeous purple flowers. There were a lot of shorebirds and sea ducks to find in the bays also. The ducks were pretty hard to get close to, but rewarding nonetheless. We had to really work our butts off to get close to those harlequin ducks. And I got a few images on the island that to me are a personal best, that I had no idea of even seeing, nevertheless photographed those guys. We also had a couple great encounters with a couple of Kodiak red fox. Not your normal red variant, but both were black and red colored cross foxes and Sitka black-tailed deer. And on the last few days we saw fawns, just a few days old too. And these little fellows were also about a month or so behind being born. And the island itself is just breathtaking. And there's something to be said about rainy, misty, moody scenery that makes the ocean and the Alaskan mountains give it just that something, that feel to it. Even more so with the rain as you get something special out of the wildlife when you find them in that wet environment that is very different than your normal sunny day look and feel. You see birds wet and rough and just different. And different is good in photography. And I'll be making a video very soon about that, something different, very soon. And one of my favorite all-time images I've ever taken was in these rainy, miserable type situations. It's a disheveled and grumpy muddy eagle on a very nasty weather day in Homer. I just love this image. This trip was very rewarding for Don and myself, learning a lot about the island and new things to look forward to on those rainy, miserable days. And that's what you're always looking for, to learn and find ways that you normally would say, hey, that's a no-go for photography day, and find some ways to make it a must-go situation. But really, this trip could have been more enjoyable regardless of the weather. To be able to spend time with my uncle, visit more with my friends John and Lydia, and experience all that we could find on Kodiak Island. So over the next several weeks, look out for about probably 4 videos or so about our experiences on Kodiak Island that I hope you'll enjoy. And also over the next few weeks, I'll have some more reviews of some new gear that I've found, and some long-term reviews of some gear I use on a daily basis, and some photography how-tos and fixes and things like that. And I think I'm also going to start a series about what's news each month about the photography gear that I use or the gear I review, and probably some how-tos on how to fix things. So everyone, I really hope you're enjoying the content here on the channel. I so very much enjoy making all this content. And leave me a comment about what you do or don't like on the channel, or things you'd like to see or know more about. And please subscribe, as it costs nothing to you, but it helps us reach many more folks. Like, share, and all that stuff. Become a member of the channel also help us fund these adventures, because these types of trips are not cheap, believe me. So for as little as $1, you can become a member of this channel and help us do more of this type of stuff. To learn more about that, just go to our Wildlife Alaska channel page and click the membership join to see what it's all about. It doesn't make you join right there, it just gives you a video that talks about what the membership does and what it gives you. All right, everyone, I'm off to go edit some of the thousands of images and footage that I captured in this trip. And until the next episode, as always, get outside and go run that shutter.